Hi, I'm Marissa, and the philosophers that I chose to focus on for my midterm were Sir Ken Robinson and Elliot Eisner. I chose to really focus on their overlapping idea of change and bringing change into education, whether it's with ourselves and the way that we educate students, taking maybe traditional ways and adding a more modern twist on them, throwing in more creativity throughout the day, and basically why change is important. So, something that I mentioned in my philosophy statement that I wrote up, it comes from Sir Ken Robinson when he discusses the idea of refinement and self evaluation. He states a quote, and it's a dynamic process that often involves making new connections, crossing disciplines, and using metaphors and analogies. It may involve all of that, but it also involves refining, testing, and focusing what you're doing. It's about original thinking on the part of the individual, and it's about judging critically whether the work and process is taking the right shape and is worthwhile, at least for the person producing it. So I think this is a great quote, and I always valued the importance of improvement and how there's no growth without refinement and self evaluation. So I use this idea to power my midterm art piece that goes along with this. So I took a painting that I completed at SVA. It was just a simple homework assignment. We were asked to pick an artist from a list and then do a study in watercolor on their own watercolor piece. So the piece that I ended up choosing was by Denise Walzer Kohler. It was a watercolor pear, and as I studied it, I created my own version of her realistic watercolor pear. So for this assignment, I decided to take the same painting that I created, look at it, reevaluate it, and try something new. So I ended up producing it in oil, and I tried Impressionism instead of realism. So with Eisner, I really appreciated his ideas on how he can make positive changes in education. And one quote that I pulled from the resources that we had was, what we can do is to generate other visions of education, other values to guide its realization, other assumptions on which a more generous conception of the practice of schooling can be built. That is, although I do not think revolution is an option, ideas that inspire new visions, values, and especially new practices are. So, doing some further research on these philosophers, I found some great extra resources with just like a little bit of extra ideas that came from them. And for Eisner, I found a list of 10 points that express his ideas on arts education. I thought that they were all great, and a couple that I found really interesting that I would like to bring into my own teaching philosophies were the arts teach children that problems can have more than one solution, which I think that we've all found in our own experiences over our years of education. I know that I find that even with skating when I'm coaching. And another one is the arts teach students that small differences can have large effects. This reminds me of in high school, in painting class or something, and my teacher used to say, oh, if you just move this one line, it'll look so much different. And I always found that to be true, so it's just really interesting. And then the arts help children learn to say what cannot be said. I think that's a really great quote, whether it be art therapy or just even art education, learning, teaching students how to express themselves. So for Ken Robinson, I came upon an article that was posted in the Washington Post, and it was on how he really wants to change education, and it pretty much aligned with what we learned through our resources that were provided for the week that we studied him. But it also included a larger excerpt on his book Creative Schools, which I read through, and I think it would be great for everybody to look it up and read it. And then just as a fun fact, something interesting I found, I'm not sure if it's still true, but it was stated that Ken Robinson's TED Talk that we watched was actually the most watched TED Talk in history with over 40 million views. And I could definitely see that because I thought it was great. It was humorous, it was interesting, and I had a great time, learning more about these philosophers. And I think it really helps when we're studying education and learning to become great educators ourselves.